2025 meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee to order. Present from the council are Heather Wiley and myself. Absent from the council is Councilmember Perkins. He will not be here. Additional attendees from the Finance Department are Melissa and Nancy, and from the Manager's Office are Zach and Charlie. And also from the Council Office, Andrew. I didn't mean to leave you out there, Andrew. Anyway. All right. So, and also I see Councilmember McCandless here as well. Thank you. We always like it when you come. All right. So, off and running here. Let's go first. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes from January 29?
So moved.
All right. I guess I'll second those. So we'll just say that they're approved since there's only two of us here to vote. All right. I looked through them and I didn't see anything, and so I think they look great. Moving right along on our agenda, the first thing up is utility billing review. Mr. Frazier, I have some notes here for you as we get to them. Do you want questions as we go along, or do you want them?
Yeah, that's fine.
Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll do that. So in the meantime, take it away.
Perfect. Little story real quick. The other day I was in a hit and run accident. The other day, I mean 2 days ago, here at Truman and Lee Summit Road intersection. So, you know, as a normal citizen, I waiting for the guy to pull over, exchange insurance and information, but that didn't occur. So I dialed 911, did the right thing. Of course, everything's fine. But I was reminded that once I started that call, like a machine started, right? Like a whole lot of things went into motion. And it reminded me of utility billing because not a lot of people get to see like the behind the scenes stuff. And there's quite a bit that goes on behind the scenes that maybe it's not front facing. And I hope that's reflected well in the formal review. And I hope you'll see it here in the slideshow as well. Always start out reviewing the methodology of how I do things. Again, assessing the effectiveness, efficiency of the program, adhering to the generally accepted government auditing standards. Of course, I interviewed people within the organization, looked at documents and data, of course. Obviously, background of our utilities. We have water, sewer, and power. The billing operations are here in this building, just right down the hallway here. And another thing worthy of note during my research was there was a migration to an advanced utility system, the software in which they use to do the billing. That occurred in 2018. Worthy of note, obviously not perfect, but still a great advancement. All right, so in my research, I discovered the Reuben Brown review back in 2018, which outlined the entire process. And I captured it here. Obviously, you can't read it very well on the slide, and I'm not going to go through every single box, but they really detailed the process from the beginning, which meter reading to the billing cycle to payment processes. It's a great read if you're interested in that. I have copies of it if you want copies, but it's very thorough. A lot of what if scenarios are built into this. If this occurs, then that will happen. So yeah, if you're interested in that, I have copies. I mean, like I said, it's very detailed. It goes through each section. One thing worthy of note is kind of the time frame that they have here. I went back a slide. The process in which these occur, from the billing cycle, the meter reading, going back to the supervisor for review, this all happens within a few days, which is pretty impressive given the amount of residents and actual meter readings that they do.
Can you speak to how much of that is automatic or, you know, electronic versus how much is, you know, manual?
Yeah, so the meter reading process, so when I speak to meter reading, that's both water and electric, right? There are no meters for sewer. I know some people might think there is, but there's not. But yeah, that's generally a manual process, right? We have employees that go out in the field and do these readings. You know, they have devices that they carry when they're within a proximity of the meter, it will relay that information to them. It's not fully automated, and there's ways to do that, and I'll get into that in my recommendations. Okay, so up to this point, are there any more questions? All right. So I wanted to take a look at the bill. During my research, there was a lot of maybe confusion on like the customer side where maybe they didn't necessarily understand the bill. So I wanted to make a point to kind of go through this to ensure, you know, what it actually looks like. So here's a pretty typical bill. I'm sure you've all seen this before. This is a standard resident. I didn't for the examples I'm about to show you, I didn't choose a commercial business bill or anything like that. This is residential, as it probably speaks to most individuals. So we'll start with water billing. Of course, there's several rate structures embedded within water billing, and it's based on a lot of different factors, right? Are you inside city limits? Are you outside city limits? Are you a resident, residential, commercial, or industrial user? And of course, meter size also factors in here. These are all metrics to use to calculate the bill. Another finding with water billing, there was, I went back 10 years, in 2014 to 2016, there was a pretty steady increase in the rates, but it has since leveled off in 2016, and that's currently where we're at today. In this graph, goes by meter size. There's a commodity charge, that's your consumption charge, and a public fire protection rate that is also calculated.
Just a question on
Yep.
that. Are most, and maybe you may or may not know this, but are most water meters 5/8 or most 3/4? I'm really curious about that because I just put one in not long ago, and so I just don't know.
What was your size?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was whatever they gave me.
Yeah, generally on the smaller side, you're going to find the residential users. From my experience, I haven't seen a residential user use a 6-inch line. That's kind of wild to me, but of course we have it there. But yeah, the 5/8, 3/4, 1 inch, that's kind of the lower end is residential. So now I'm going to go into this example. It's a word problem. I hope you're all familiar with word problems. We learned in elementary school. This is great. So in this example, if a resident has a 5/8-inch meter size, then our base charge is $11.95, as indicated previously. If you look up at the top right of that graph, $11.95, that's still where we're at. And that's your base charge. There's also a fire line charge of $286, which is added, and that help compensates for hydrant maintenance and fire lines that are associated with that. Of course, there's the consumption charge, which is noted here as the commodity charge. And the first 2 centum cubic feet, also known as 200 cubic feet, are included in the base rate. And beyond that, they are charged the $3.43 per centum cubic feet. Again, there's the commodity charge, $3.43. So, in this example, if the total consumption is 6 centum cubic feet, or 600 cubic feet, the billable consumption is actually 4, because that 2 is included in the base, right? You do that simple math there. And then there's a tax applied. So let me clean this up a little bit.
Can I ask a question on the tax part?
Yep.
Where does that tax go?
That's a great question. Yeah, I'd have to refer to either finance or city manager.
I just,
That particular tax is sales tax, so it's remitted to the state first, and then the state will turn around and turn it back to us as part of our monthly distribution.
Any more? So this is kind of cleanup version of what I just discussed. And then there's your total for the water side of the house. And on the bill, it's a much more smaller version of what I just indicated. So I could see how a customer would be like, how are you calculating this? What's going on here? When it's not fully detailed, but we'll move on. Anything on water before I go to the sewer side of the house? Sanitary sewer billing. So again, the billing structure is very similar. It's directly linked to water usage, obviously. You know, there's different types: residential, commercial, industrial, just like water. There's some citywide average components to this that I go through in my formal review. And I don't know if I can state this clearly enough, but sewer rates are directly related and linked to water consumption. There are no sewer meters. So, and just like the water, the sewer rates from 2016 to 2020, you know, it steadily increased, but then plateaued in 2020. And that's where we've been at since then. Same with the volume charge regarding sanitary sewer.
so just to be clear on that part, so water hasn't increased, we haven't had an increase in water rates since 2016,
Correct.
and no increase in sewer rates since 2020.
Correct.
Thank you.
So we'll go into another word problem for you math experts out there. So again, and again, it's based on water usage, right? So if a resident has a 5/8 inch meter water meter, base charge is $18, just as indicated in the previous slide, 18 to 2020. There's a regulatory compliance charge. Now you're probably asking, what is this? So the regulatory compliance charge is essentially for debt services. At one point in time, there was some improvements that needed to be made, and the city incurred debt to make those improvements. And this regulatory compliance charge is there to pay that debt.
Can I clarify that? I believe the improvements that were made were mandated.
Yes, the city entered into a consent decree with the federal government because of our combined sewer system, and because that was no longer allowable, that's what consent decree meant, that we agreed to make those improvements.
When you say combined sewer system,
Sewer and stormwater flowed into the same pipe. And on a day like this, when you got too much stormwater in there, it would cause the city to have to discharge outside of the normal treatment process.
So yep, that is included in sanitary sewer billing. So for this example, let's say the total consumption is 4.78 centum cubic feet. You do the math there, and we're looking at 2167. And then let me clean this up, make it look a little bit better. Base charge, regulatory compliance charge, consumption charge. There's your total sewer. For this example. And again, I was using residential numbers. This is most people in this example.
Andrew, sorry, one more question about the regulatory compliance charge. How much longer do we have on that? Does anyone know?
That's a good question. That's a great question.
I think at least 2 more decades.
and I have a question as well. So on the consumption charge part, am I correct? I recall hearing this at one point, that that was based on consumption in the wintertime.
So, I'd have to research that. I don't want to give you misinformation here.
I think that's what I recall because of people watering their yards and stuff.
Yeah,
Or washing their cars or, whatever else might happen.
yeah. I think you're right. I remember something about that as well. I just don't have it there at the tip of my tongue. But I can definitely get back with you
Okay, thank you.
for clarification. I know definitely electricity has the, seasonal rates. Okay. Any more questions before we dive into electricity? Oh, yeah. So before we move to electricity, I just wanted to showcase kind of what's on the bill regarding sewer. They show the regulatory compliance charge, and that might be, they probably put that on there because they have to, but it shows a little more as opposed to water in this instance. And of course, there's in this example, there's connection fees, and that's pretty standard, pretty normal. Different municipalities I've worked for, that's standard. Okay, for electricity, obviously sewer and water have many different service options for residents and commercial users and whatnot. I would say that electricity or power has even a more robust service options, and rightfully so. And obviously they have structured pricing and billing, and everything is to ensure sustainability and compliance. And for sure, water and sewer is highly regulated. But I would argue that electricity is more regulated, right? And all of that filters down to the billing practices. So we'll go back to a work problem. Again, I chose an example of typical residential rate. And for a resident that used 1141 kilowatts of electricity during the summer season, like we talked about, this is seasonal. They even break it down as seasonal. With the consumption rate, I mean, do the basic math there, you're looking at 140. So they also have a power supply cost adjustment added to the bill. And people may wonder, what is this? How does this work? So the power supply cost adjustment allows IPL to adjust customers' bills based on fuel costs, because it costs money to generate power, right? Fuel. And as you know, fuel prices a month ago are not the same as they are today. So this is a mechanism to allow them to adjust for that. There's also a base charge as well. Pilot, so payment in lieu of taxes. And we're looking at a new total here. And there is a sales tax on top of that. So let me clean this up a little bit. This is what you're looking at. What a normal residential user is paying for here in Independence. This is just an example. This is nobody's bill. This is just an example. And you'll see on the electric side of the bill, they do kind of showcase all of that, what I had just talked about. Now, they may not know what a pilot is or what it does, or the PCA portion, but it is accounted for there on the bill.
And there's no pilot fee on water or sewer, correct?
Correct.
And
Can I clarify that on the pilot fee? The way that I understand it is that just a couple of years ago, Power and Light opted to pull that pilot fee out as a separate line. It's always been kind of embedded in the rate structure for all three. So the 9.08 would be considered part of the water service and rate and the
Okay.
sewer service. So
Okay.
it's kind of embedded, but Power and Light chose to kind of
Okay.
pull it out and show
they
it
pulled out,
separately.
showed it separately, I see.
Yep.
But it's in there in the other one, it just doesn't show up separate like that. Okay, got it.
Andrew,
Yes.
so we've had some particularly cold weeks, days this winter, which increases your bill, increases
Absolutely.
rates. So are we working to remind our customers? I mean, I know we have a pretty big social media presence with IPL now. Have we worked on that?
So part of my recommendation is going to be more communication. It's going to happen on every review that I do. I don't think you can communicate enough.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's always room for improvement in communication, for sure.
And then sort of back to the meters. I'm assuming we have a wide range of meter age in this city.
Yes, ma'am.
And so we've got some pretty old meters. So how do you check to make sure they're accurate?
We are on I don't want to say a like really defined meter replacement plan, but generally we know the life cycles of those meters and when those need to be swapped out. But really to both of the points that you're making, both for usage conservation and for having a more robust meter replacement program, that is one small part of why we have recommended as staff the conversion and implementation of the automatic metering program. Because that, for example, we can see hour to hour, day to day, what somebody's usage looks like and start to see, is there a leaking toilet, a leaking water line, a leaking pool, something like that, before they get their bill 27 days later and find out what something like that has looked like.
Thanks.
Among water, sewer, and electric, there's a wide variety of programs available to customers, and I've mentioned this before in a previous review. It's definitely covered in depth in my formal review, and you can find it online, city website. A lot of good stuff here. I don't want to undersell it. This is really good stuff. But moving on. Any questions on those programs? I mean,
One more, sorry.
no, yeah.
So are we taxing the pilot?
So let's go back to the bill here. So the pilot fee is included and then the sales tax comes after. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. That whole, at the beginning of this slide presentation, there was the Reuben Brown pictures that I included. That was a great source for me when I began my research, and there was a lot of good stuff in there and a lot of takeaways. I added some takeaways here that I found important. And a lot of it's very technical in nature, and I can go into each one of these, but there were some access control issues that were present on who can do what within the program, like authorities. Yeah, and of course, the recommendation was the automated meter reading. And I think we're in like the lower 18% of the United States that's not doing it. Everybody else is, which speaks for itself.
Andrew, I want to back up just for a second to the offered utility programs.
Yeah, sure.
Is there a place that citizens can go and this is a great list. I don't even know what some of them mean.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
Is there a place that citizens can go and look at that?
So I had to do some research. I did through the city website, right? And it's not, the information was there for sure on the city website. It just wasn't easily accessible from my perspective. I feel like something like this should be on a billboard somewhere, but I was still able to get to it and read about it and all these things. Very informative.
All right, thank you.
The Reuben Brown review. Again, I can give you guys, whoever wants them, I have copies. It's a great read. And a lot of my recommendations are gonna follow in line with kind of what they had. Same with the 2024 business processing review, which occurred August of last year. Advanced utility systems, I think. And again, a lot of takeaways there were very technical in nature, which is great for the staff. Write-offs was a big one. I think we talked about write-offs in the last Audit Finance Committee meeting. Remember, we talked about write-offs being a component. And currently, last time I checked, utility billing staff are actively addressing some of these issues and concerns, and even with finance department, I talked to them, and they've addressed, are currently actively addressing some of these issues. So, write-offs was a big one. Any questions on those? And I can go into detail at each one of those.
Not a question, but I just wanted the committee to be aware. Matt McLaughlin, Deputy Director of Municipal Services, has joined us, and up until 3 weeks ago, Matt oversaw customer billing until that was transferred. So if you need more technical questions, Matt's here to help. Sorry.
I wouldn't mind if you went through each one of those.
So data restrictions, okay. In the 2024 business process review, data restrictions, so there was a default setting, so this is gonna get kind of technical, with the restrictions that, oh my gosh, where am I? Sorry, excuse me. So this involves collection status changes within tickets. And there was restrictions in the default settings within this program, right? And that's about the limit of my knowledge, because I'm not the technical expert within that. Layouts. One of the recommendations was use layouts for date ranges, but prefer data restrictions. Custom fields and tables, create support tickets for custom lookup table display issues. Again, very technical.
So in that review are we saying that before these were identified and changed, that there were issues or problems
Yeah,
prior to that?
yeah, and not like problems, but not like, it's not gonna significantly impact operations. Clearly, they were successful in operating. It's just little minor changes here and there that will make the system more streamlined.
Thank you.
Write-offs we talked about at the last Audit and Finance Committee meeting. Establishing regular write-off process with like just cleanup in general, using collection agencies, bad debt, and aged out write-offs. Those were all concerns within the billing process. Maybe even refine the criteria to how they send it to collections. There was deposits here, update transaction code descriptions to eliminate confusions. That was an issue they had. Payment allocations, review, configure for payment allocation priorities and percentages. Again, this is the 2024 business process review, not mine. Cash register balancing, address missing general ledger lines in cash register journal ticket. They had a ticket number with this one. Assistance contribution, use new transaction codes for assistance, pledges, and consider the assistance contribution functionality. Taxes, consider separating tax ARs for improving adjustments requiring transaction code revisions. Meter reading, introduce a released status, process exceptions post import, and add notes fields. Collections, adjust settings for notices and enable process future arrangements. Review criteria for broken arrangement collection status changes.
I'm wondering if, since we have Matt here, if, since he was in the weeds in this, and this was just uncovered information for you. Matt, is there anything here that you would like to or could elaborate on that might be helpful to us?
I'm not sure how far into the weeds I can get. I know a lot of these stem from updating the procedures or how our customer information system, the software that we have, the billing software, to make sure that the points that they found in their review that we're meeting and improving. We're working on a lot of these. I wish I had Denise Clark here, who's our customer service manager, to really get into the weeds if you have some really detailed questions. And I would welcome any questions that you guys have. We could funnel them to Denise and we can get those answered back to you. But essentially, they saw some issues in our software. We have to go back and improve those. We're working on a lot of those. I don't know what was said before I got here, but one of the first things is our write-offs. I think it sounds like you guys have already discussed that somewhat. And we're taking these on a kind of a priority basis. The bigger things we're hitting first, but you know, taxes is another thing that we have to get. We've already done a lot of that. I think Nancy and Finance has been involved with that as well to make sure that we're charging the appropriate taxes. It depends upon, you know, what kind of business you are or where you're at. If since we serve, you know, water outside of the city, that we've got to make sure that we're charging appropriate. So all of those have to be reviewed and make sure that we've tightened those up. Meter reading, collections, that kind of thing. So I'm sorry I don't have a real good in, but I would welcome any more questions, detailed questions that you have specifically from the review on those. That helps. Okay.
And I do go kind of into the weeds in the formal review when I give it to you. I was just kind of highlighting some of the things they talked about in this one here. My recommendations are obviously going to fall in line with what they're already doing, with some of the recommendations already provided. Definitely full automation of meter reading. I think that's somewhere we need to be as a city. And that will just trickle down and streamline a lot of different things. It'll have a trickle-down effect on that. And you could look up a dozen stories online how that benefits cities. Streamlining the billing cycle, streamlining the bill reconciliation, all of these things can be improved upon. And, you know, if automated meters, again, I think will even impact those things. Enhance internal controls and security. This was talked about in the Reuben Brown review and the previous 2024 review. Implement granular access systems and conduct regular system audits. You'll find those, you know, issues within your system. And I think you guys are obviously finding issues and addressing those issues. It's great. One of the things that came to me was there was certain employees with incredible knowledge base, and if like Denise Clark, she's great resource. If that person were to leave, it would be a real hamper in service. Of course, they would overcome it, but maybe spreading the wealth on that knowledge sharing. So in the event somebody does leave or whatever, it's not so jarring. Audit trails for sure. Helps improve accountability. Let's see, customer service, communication. I'm always gonna, and probably every review, talk about communication. Be more proactive in communicating, like you were talking about with those programs. Maybe it's not necessarily communicated very well that we offer these programs. So just kind of working around little things like that even, you know, just communication on a general scale. Dispute resolution, customer feedback mechanism. There's different methods and ways we as a city receive complaints or disputes. They do it in person, online. There's just a lot of different ways, right? Maybe if there was some sort of repository where we could get all these complaints. I don't even know if that exists, but if there's a way to put all of these complaints or issues into a repository that can organize, maybe we'll see where the choke points are and issues, see where the issues are.
So these are kind of recommendations that were made in the 2024 study?
These are mine.
These are yours, okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. All right. So I'm going to back up just a second to the 2024.
Yep.
Is there a work plan or a reporting process on the status of all those recommendations and how they've done on those, or?
Not to my knowledge. In April, I'll give you an update on everything that I've done and a status of where everything is, if they've even, you know, pursued those recommendations. And I can include these in there just to see, you know. But yeah, in April, I'll definitely have that report to you guys.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be good, and, you know, flip over to your next page if you would, real quick. One more. Regarding dispute resolution, because obviously that's dealing with a citizen that has, or a customer that has an issue of a significant nature. When you say enhanced, what do you mean by that?
So, let me look at my notes.
If I can speak, I would say as far as the dispute resolution, that goes in, I mean, from my point of view, would be additional training for our representatives and staff, and that can be both in-house and outside. You learn from each other from experience. We've got a lot of experience within that room. Both the supervisors and then the staff themselves can help the new people that come in to resolve those disputes that we see on a daily basis. So, but yeah, first off is training, and going back to some of the other, you know, you were talking about that looking forward, if we would have an employee move, we've gone to a lot of standard operating procedures to where we're making sure we're documenting things and processes so that somebody does leave tomorrow, it's not dropped. We want to make sure that everybody else can pick up and read them. And that goes back to even those when we have those frequently asked questions or those disputes that we see, it becomes not repetition, but we have a process documented and a response that's consistent throughout. So from everybody to meet that.
Yeah, I think that's helpful and really important. I agree with that. Regarding the dispute resolution, so I had an issue that personally that I had came up with. I shared with Andrew in the process because he was in the middle of things. I was really fortunate that I got the person that I talked to when I came in and talked about that, because that was a person that was well seasoned. They'd been, you know, and they were able to answer lots of questions and correct the situation. Had I gotten someone with less experience, I think I could have been a pretty frustrated guy by the end of that process. So I think your point's well taken that, you know, training and that is really key. And we're always, I know in an organization our size, we're always in that turnover process. I mean, to some degree or another, but having, you know, standard operating procedures like that, I think make a big difference. So.
Yeah, and we try to make sure the staff knows that, you know, if they don't know the answer, don't make something up. I mean, go and get the answer from either a supervisor or a coworker that does know that. So we try and get that started right off the bat.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Okay.
I added that consider implementing an online portal for submitting and tracking disputes, but I don't know how real that could be used, especially if it's a verbal dispute. And now the employee's got to input everything into a computer, to a tracking system. I don't know if that's even viable.
Yeah, I mean, we do absolutely document those notes within CIS. Each account has, you know, a note field, if you will, so that we can have that history there, because when they call in, they're not always going to get the same person. So that's the beauty of having that system in place, so that when the next representative gets that call that wasn't on the first time, they can look back at the notes and make sure that we document it well, so they can pick it up and continue on with the same conversation, and again, be consistent, not switch gears and say yes when the other one said no, kind of deal. So, yeah.
Moving on to program enhancement and valuation. Continue to improve programs. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Pretty easy recommendation. Revert to owner was one that came to light. maybe improved landlord communication or incentivize that program in some way. I don't know what that looks like, but something of that nature. You know. And personnel enhancement, right? So everybody's having personnel issues. So this is a pretty generic recommendation for, you know, recruitment, retention, that sort of thing. And again, I don't know how flexible your work hours can be given the nature. But, you know, that's just an idea of how to incentivize people to come work with the flexible work schedules and things of that nature. One thing that did come up was, I can't remember who I was speaking with, but an ordinance review task force or group of individuals that kind of review ordinances related to rates or processes within utility billing. It sounded like that could use a review. And again, I don't know how viable that would be.
Well, I'm gonna look at the city manager. Is that something the PUAB ought to consider undertaking?
Yeah, I think that is a good landing spot for that to be further evaluated. And I could even see that coming as a communication from the council to the utility board, asking them for some input on that.
Thank you.
That was the big one there. Creating clear policies for non-payment related and utility services. Continuously review and internal procedures for best practices. And I believe that these things are occurring, but continue to do so. Long-term wise, review long-term software needs, continue to look at monthly performance metrics, and community engagement, communication. I think communication is always going to be a thing, so reaching out to the community, I think will benefit in whatever capacity.
I know from conversations with our electric utility director that that's on his radar screen in a big way. And so I think we'll see some improvements there as time over the fairly near future.
That's essentially it. There's definitely opportunities for improvement, as there is with any organization or department. There was definitely additional insights from the Rubin Brown review and the 2024 business process review. Future outlook, you know, just embracing some of these changes, like the automated meter reading. You know, change is inevitable. So all these things are just going to reinforce trust and reliability with residents and kind of build that trust back and adapt to future challenges. And that's essentially it. Yeah. Any questions?
Any questions?
I don't know, this may be for city manager. What is our delinquent payment disconnection process?
It's pretty lengthy. There are certain procedures that we have to follow as far as what's laid out by state statute.
Right.
So we can't alter from those, but I mean,
Okay.
it goes through multiple notifications through the billing process. I have to back up and think about it if I can. I don't want to say you'll get a delinquent notice first on the bill at 30 days delinquent.
30 days, okay.
You'll get after that you'll get a notice of disconnection. There's a phone call that's made prior to, and then finally you would go to the disconnection. So there's multiple, and I might be missing one in there, multiple notifications before we even would consider going out to disconnect. But, I mean, and it varies upon if it's a type of meter or service. I mean, if it's a business or one of those are looked at a little differently than just a homeowner, because there's other items, and then through what's a statute, what we can do or allowed to do. So, yeah, I mean, we follow state statutes on how we do it.
And you might mention the weather.
Yes, there are clauses on both when it's too cold or too hot, where we can't, for those cooling times, there's, if it's forecast to be below 32 degrees, we can't shut off in the next 24 hours. Or if it's over 100 degrees, that with the heat index, I believe is the values there that we can't turn off as well. So
And
those are
then-
clauses.
Thank you. There's a difference also if it's a rental, right? I mean,
I don't believe so, because we a lot of times we're not sure if it's a rental or the owner
Right.
necessarily, but if it's the account holder, if you will,
okay,
basically is if they're not paying their bill and they've gone through all the notices, then they can be shut off just the same as
okay.
the homeowner.
And just, assuming we at some point get AMI, that should expedite that process, or not expedite it, but it should make it easier or at least less labor intensive to do that, correct?
Yeah, one of the big things that we've unfortunately seen, we've been having, if you want to say, some unsafe situations when we're out disconnecting and whatnot. And with the AMI coming in, where you're automated, and we can turn things off remotely. We don't have to have personnel on site or in the backyard or, vulnerable to something there. So that's one of the biggest things that we would really like to get AMI on board is a safety factor to keep our personnel safe. So yes, that and it would streamline it as well. It is a much simpler process that, yeah, it's a remote done, not having to go out there. Definitely.
Anything else? Okay. Anything else, Andrew?
No, that's it.
Mr.
Appreciate your
Manager,
time.
Any responses you want to make on anything?
I wanted to just clarify, because the question was asked earlier, that regulatory compliance fee is in effect till 2042. So we were pretty close there.
Good. All right. Thank you. All right, well, thank you, Andrew. Appreciate that. And we will continue to, I'm sure, get questions on utility billing forever. But that's real helpful. Matt, thanks for joining us. I think we can turn you loose if you'd like, just because I know you kind of jumped in here, so I appreciate that. So, all right. Next item on our agenda, we're moving out of old business to new business, is council travel resolution. I asked this to be added, became aware of a resolution that was adopted back in 2019 by the council at that time. I don't believe, well, Councilmember Perkins might have been on at that time, but I don't think anybody else was. And in this resolution, there's just a number of pieces that are, to me, a little cumbersome or a little burdensome to the city and the council relative to, for example, I'm looking at one that says each time a travel resolution form is submitted by a council member or mayor, an informational item shall be added on the next regular council agenda, which isn't, necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, so I guess what I wanted to bring up here is there's some, for starters, I think we're not currently adhering to this resolution, in my opinion, and so in number two, some questions relative to that, how that process would best work. And so I was just wondering, Mr. City Manager, if you have any thoughts or suggestions relative to this and whether we should, do away with it completely, leave parts of it in place, leave it all in place. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think you always have to look at things in the context of when those were put into place. And at that period in time, the city council was very active in traveling. And I think there were some concerns from some members of the council about the value or wisdom in some of those trips that were being taken. And so to maybe get a better understanding of if it was appropriate, for example, for a council member to go to the Taste of Chicago, it was good to have a report like this so the rest of the council could be aware that was happening and get a bit better understanding what the purpose of that visit was. One of the things that I think has occurred since that time is the addition of the leave of absence request system that we have now, where you can go online and look at, for example, my recent visit to Washington, D.C. And part of my travel, I have to answer 3 questions about where did I go, what value did I get from it, what was the benefit to the city, any other comments. And all of the travel forms associated with that trip are there. So we've got some tools in place now that we didn't before. And I think we've got some other accountability mechanisms that maybe we didn't have before. So whereas maybe that was an important tool at the time, I do think we've got some other things in place now that do make that a bit redundant and cumbersome, and would probably not lose any bit of accountability or transparency if we weren't to keep that on the books.
Okay.
Has there been much travel since the pandemic?
No, very little. Very little.
So it sounds like it'd be your recommendation that the council rescind this particular resolution, or at least discuss rescinding it,
Yeah, that again, because of the other mechanisms that we have now, it would be my recommendation to rescind because I do think it's redundant of other checks and balances that we have in place now.
Okay. Well, like I said, I discovered, or I came across this and found out that, it really wasn't being adhered to completely, and not on purpose, just on an oversight, and that made me think that this might be the right place to bring it to was Audit and Finance. And so I guess it might be appropriate if we wanted to make a recommendation to the full council to rescind this. Do you have any thoughts, Councilmember Wiley?
I just don't think there's been much travel. I mean, since this was in 2019 and then the pandemic hit. So, but I agree. I think if we've got other things in place that are better, then we should utilize that.
I also think, and I know what I'm about to say is difficult to quantify, but what travel is occurring now seems to be more routine and consistent with peer cities. So for example, legislative visits to Jefferson City, legislative visits to Washington, D.C., and these aren't, every month, annual visits. The Missouri Municipal League conference. These are the kind of things that your peers around the metro and the state are attending. And I would say it's more abnormal that we haven't had a stronger presence in recent years. But I think kind of some of the stuff that was sort of trying to be guarded against was some of the more non-traditional or abstract events, and not things that you would show up and expect to see a local elected official at.
I think the two questions that come to my mind really are, one is budgetary and the other one is kind of an approval kind of a thing. So from a budgetary standpoint, obviously anything outside of the budget that is approved would need to come to council for a revised budget amendment, correct?
Yeah, if we were to exceed that original budgetary appropriation, we would have to do some kind of a budget amendment. Yes,
Right,
sir.
so that kind of, so that means anything, you know, if we exceeded as a council our budgeted travel allowance, that would have to come before the council anyway, and it would raise lots of questions, I think, in the event that that happened. The other question, though, I think is maybe a little bit different, and that is, you know, what's the best process for us to determine what travel occurs and who actually goes on those trips? Any thoughts in that regard?
You know, this is something I think that it's meritorious to revisit. You know, we've looked at different models in the past, and I'll use one example that I'm coming to mind right now. The city of Lee Summit sets aside an allocation, equal distribution per council member every year. I don't remember the dollar amount, but it's nominal. And those council members get to decide how they would like to use their allocation set aside each year. Do they want to go to the Municipal League Legislative Conference? Do they want to be part of a DC delegation visit? How do they want to participate in that? You know, I think other municipalities have set up a legislative advisory group, and that's the group that's going to handle these legislative visits. And they've set up a policy group that goes to Municipal League. So there are different ways to structure that, and I would be happy to work through my office to maybe come up with other municipalities and how they're handling that, and maybe provide 3 to 5 different options that you all could consider.
Yeah, so I guess I'm looking, Councilmember White, I'm looking at you. So I think maybe two things. Just travel would be a good item for a study session to, one, discuss rescinding this so all the council can weigh in. And then number 2, review what findings you might have and recommendations you have in terms of how we determine who goes and how often they go and that sort of thing.
And I do want to make what I think are 2 very important points here for those who are watching or will watch later. Number 1, as Councilmember Wiley said, post-pandemic, travel has slowed considerably. The council's current budget out of a $410 million budget for 7 people is $8,000 for travel. And I'm not sure that's being fully expended at this time anyway. However, as we are having these conversations as the 5th largest city in the state and having a representation at these meetings, because we have been absent and it is noticeable, we are having departmental budget hearings right now, and really was pleased yesterday in reviewing the mayor and council budget that the representatives from your office have recommended some additional funding, nominal, an extra $5,000 to support additional travel expenses if the council wants to do that. But I just want to remind everybody, these aren't, you know, junkets. These are going to Jefferson City where hundreds of millions of dollars in state funding is on the line, where regulatory decisions that have a fiscal impact on us or revenue conversations that could undermine our budget are being made, and you visiting with your peers about what that means. And the same at the state, or pardon me, the federal level. So these are elected officials meeting with your peers to advocate for new funding and to preserve the funding that you've already got.
All right. Well, I think we're in agreement that if you could kind of put that in 2 pieces and bring it to a study session soon, that would be great.
We'll work on that.
All right, thank you. All right. With that, Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. So we'll kick off. A couple months ago, we added this financial overview. It's targeted pretty heavy on general fund because that's where a lot of our budgetary constraints are right now. So one thing that you will note here is through January 31st that our revenues are tracking fairly near to budget. Sales tax is currently down 1.68% from budget. Down below where you see that sales tax growth, this is where I take the actual revenues by the business and put it into the business activity month. Through November, we were tracking down 1.68% year over year. And so that's previous 12 months from November 2024. I will say I was able to update this. My favorite day of the month when we get our sales tax reports, and I can go in and do my analysis and see how things are tracking. So it ticked back up. It looks like we got some more November payments. So when you see these charts on here, you will notice that November has ticked back up just because we got more payments for that business activity month. So it's a really interesting way to look at it and just see where we are overall. So right now we're sitting at about 0.5% decrease over the past 12 months, which is a good thing. So even though it's a little bit of a decrease, it's trending back up in the right direction. Whether or not that is tied at all to the local CPI inflation rates or what might be coming in the near future that might impact that, we'll keep a close eye on it. Our use tax rates continue to slow there in the gross or growth rate, pardon me. And so far, we have just started to see that water flow of funds start to trickle out of the police use tax fund and go into the other sales tax funds. So when you see maybe general fund revenues are trailing just a little bit behind, that's mostly due to that pretty large chunk of money is just starting to come in. One thing that we are going to be keeping an eye on in the department is with our real estate property tax. So we are going to start seeing some clawbacks coming in. Do you have a firm number on that yet, or I know you were working on it? Okay, so she's still working on it, and we'll start to have some kind of idea of what's going to be happening with that. The county has also let Nancy know that they are doing some sort of changeover in their financial software that is supposed to prevent this clawback situation from happening going forward. So we will see when that happens.
Scary when the county makes any kind of change like that.
A couple of years ago in my previous job, the Department of Revenue made a changeover in their financial software, and our sales tax receipts one month were half of what they were expected to be. So it's always scary any time that happens. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it.
Before you go to the next page, one question relative to the use taxes. So is that, you're saying that they're beginning the waterfall. Is that earlier or later than last year?
I think it's a little bit later than it was last year. I don't know if you remember. If it's not later, the amount was a little bit smaller. Use tax fluctuates a lot more than the sales tax does. So I do, again, go back and put the use tax into the business activity month to kind of keep track of that as well, because I would expect with use tax to see a bump, in those October, November, December months around Christmas. So just kind of keeping an eye on it from that perspective. So it's important to note that I know that looks like a downhill trend. And so while the growth is slowing, we know why, but it is still growing. So that's the good thing. So on the expenditure side in the general fund, you will notice that there are several departments that are a little bit above what we would expect as a percentage of year to date. So in the city manager's office, we looked at that. We have some splits on employees that oversee other things and other funds and departments. And so that increase is due to that. So we need to go in and we'll have to look at it and make some corrections going back. Your police department, the expenditure increase right now is largely due to the police salary increases that we saw. So you will notice we did get about $1 million. I think this happened in December in the ARPA reimbursement to offset that. So what we'll need to do for that amount is go in and amend their budgeted dollars in their salaries for that. And then we have also started collecting on that Prop PD sales tax. So we did get, I think in January, for the January disbursement, we got for motor vehicle sales tax, and then we saw kind of the first amounts rolling in this month for sales tax. Fire is also one of the departments that's a little bit over. That's mostly due to their overtime. And then ComDev is due to the transit changes. So there was some additional expense there. I have kind of gone through and sat down with Nancy and we marked some changes or just some highlights in the following pages. Marijuana sales tax did look like it was trailing kind of behind, but at this point it is up 4.41% of budget. So another one that I keep at,
Page?
that was page 7 on the financials.
I was wondering on that, I actually had that marked, why there were no expenses under that expenditures.
Yeah, so this, I think we do this as a transfer out. Yeah. No, I think it will go to a capital fund. So it'll go to a capital fund. So the transfer is in the capital funds because once you transfer money from your governmental funds into a capital, you can't transfer it back out. So we only do the transfers as they occur. So that's why you're not seeing anything out of there yet. So there are projects that those dollars are going towards, and we will see that
I
happen.
knew there were things earmarked,
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
That's why I was curious about it.
For the sales tax funds, most of those are tracking very near to budget, with the exception of the use tax at this point, because like I said, that waterfall has just started. Let me see what other pages I have marked here. I did want to draw your attention to page 17 on the grants fund. So right now, we have not seen any noticeable delays on receiving dollars. So when you see that it has a negative fund balance, a lot of that is just due to we have the expenses that occur. Some things we bill monthly, some things are billed quarterly. And so it's just when the reimbursements for those come back in. But so far, we've not seen any delay on getting payments there.
That was one of my questions as to whether you'd seen any delay from that. Back on page 14, I noticed that this for CDBG fund, I noticed that the expenditures were substantially higher than revenues, and I just didn't know if maybe we just hadn't gotten a grant yet or what that was. I was just kind of curious if you knew.
No, that one on offset of your head. Here.
Okay.
Short down on the bottom.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Which page is the new police sales tax in this packet? Is it in this packet? It's not, okay. Of February,
Yes.
okay. Awesome, thank you.
Let's see. I looked at that one. And I think that was everything. Nope, I have a couple more, I think. No, I think that is everything that I had marked, unless you had any specific questions. Just things that I thought might be important to highlight.
Yeah, I've already asked my questions. So unless Heather, you have anything more?
Yeah. So, and we're finishing those up now. I just need to finish the summary for it, and then we will send out, and I think we've named it, what, Prop PD sales tax?
Yeah, probably.
Yep. Yep, that's what we've called it. So that's what you'll see.
So you came to us at a study session maybe a month ago, and you had some concerns about revenue. This feels a little bit more hopeful. Is that right?
I'm hopeful that yes, that it's. I mean, I always take a conservative approach when it's budgeting revenues. There's just so much uncertainty right now, going on with the economy, and it's really difficult to know, what the impacts are going to be because it's a little bit different than what's happened in the past.
Right.
So right now, I mean, we're trending very close to budget. When I am doing my budget projections, right now it looks like revenues in the general fund will exceed the budget, not by a lot and not by the margin that we have seen in years past. But I don't have a lot of concern that we're going to be drawing down on fund balance.
Good. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. All right. That brings us to other new business, and I do have one other item that I wanted to bring up. We had a study session, last study session. We had a presentation relative to insurance, liability and related insurance. And then we talked a bit about, potentially at some point needing to self-insure, or it might be wise for us to self-insure. So I really have a couple of things that kind of came out of that discussion, or thoughts that I had relative to moving forward with that, is so that at some point, we don't know when the right time for that might be. Charlesworth could come to us next year and say, you need to do it because the market's gone really bad. Or it could be 5 years, and we just don't know. My question really at this point is, what things should we as a city be doing to prepare for that inevitable thing? Sounds like it's very likely to happen at some point in the future. I'm thinking of safety and risk mitigation techniques or efforts that we might put in place. I'm thinking of reserve requirements and things that we might consider, and how we begin to, put away a little bit every year so that at some point we can do that. So those are just a couple of things that come out of mind. But I'm wondering if it might be what you think the best approach to be beginning to prepare for that at some point might be.
Well, first of all, I do think that's an astute exercise that we should begin. As you saw in your study session, as you say, we don't know when, but an organization our size, with the activities we're engaged in, eventually we are going to reach that crossover point where it is more financially wise for us to self-insure. I think the appropriate thing to do would be working with my staff for us to sort of do some contingency planning of identifying the steps that would need to be taken, both short and long term, and start to lay out a business plan so that we can start to work those strategies, and we're not trying to play, if it is next year, we're not trying to play catch up and working from a reactive standpoint, but trying to be very proactive about it. So I would be very excited to work with our staff and put together a business plan and a strategy of the steps that need to be taken to be in a good position to do that when that time comes.
Yeah, I think that would be wise, and I think, in addition to that, the timeliness is good, because as you're working on budgets, if there needs to be something, put in budget the next budget year, this would be the time to have that discussion. So I know you may not be able to make final decisions on that kind of a thing, but at least begin to discuss that and put some elements in the budget connected to that.
I mean, I think you're exactly right. I think that could even be a portion of this year's strategy of, do we need to start identifying a certain amount of set-aside funds to start toward that outcome. So yeah, we'll work together, looking at the finance director. We'll get with our third-party advisor and start putting together those exercises.
We've been talking a fair amount about budget, and so, can you just review for us, given that that's coming, in the near future, kind of what the general process is, so that any citizens that might be looking for that information would be aware of that?
Yeah, so budget actually, so the council adopts, under the city charter, you'll adopt the budget in June, and a few months after that each year, usually early in fall, about the time children are going back to school, we start the process of working on next year's budget again. That always starts with identifying what our known costs are and our known cost increases, like where have we had negotiated wage increases with a collective bargaining agreement, where our contracted services have a price increase built into those. So knowing the things that just to keep doing the business we're doing, those cost increases we have to have in there. Then usually in the late fall or right around Christmas time, we have departments start putting together what we call their package requests. So things that they are identifying that they would like new funding to be allocated for, to either expand services or add new services for the community. We are in a period of time right now where we're meeting with each of those departments to hear what those requests are and evaluate those against, the finite resources we have available to decide what we think we should recommend to the council to implement into the budget that helps further the strategic goals the council has identified. Then by city charter, we are required to present that to you on May, the first study session in May, which this year is May 12th. And then the council has roughly 45 days for review, deliberation, discussion, and then ultimately the second business meeting in June is where the budget ordinance has its final consideration. One of the things that we have kind of had an on-again, off-again approach to, depending on appetites of the council, are these departmental budget presentations. And this has been a council that has been very interested in understanding the needs and experiences and perspectives at that departmental level. So we did that last year over the course of 2 special study sessions. And we've heard that the council is very interested in continuing that practice this year. So we're working to get those scheduled as well. So May will be a very busy month of, taking in the budget from the council, reviewing it, asking your questions, and then June is really when those decisions have to be made. I will say, while we're still, understanding what our revenues are going to be like to work with and what these known expense increases are, some other municipalities have started working on their budget, and I'm one of these nerds that gets a Google News alert every day, signed up for municipal news, and it's been, with some of the economic uncertainty out there, it's been somewhat of a challenging budget year for other cities, and I think we're going to certainly, this isn't going to be a year of wild growth and expansion in services. Forecasting what we've seen from these other jurisdictions, I think we'll be working within a very confined space as well.
Probably not wild growth in that. Hopefully wild growth in capital spending coming up if we can pass the GO bonds coming up. So that would be a big hope.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilmember Wiley, anything else for you? Mr. City Manager, anything else for you?
Nothing from me. See the Assistant City Manager, anything else from you today? Nope, we're good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, then we will stand adjourned.